What's up, Jay Martin here. Now, my guest today is Mark Brennan, the CEO of Ascendant Resources. Now, I had Ascendant on the program a few months ago. Yesterday, they put out big news, recently receiving $15 million from Sprott Streaming Corp as a vote of confidence in their production future. Now, this puts them in position to make that production decision and retain the capital partners required to do so. They also recently received some phenomenal political support. We get into that in today's interview. Here is Mark Brennan, the CEO of Ascendant Resources. Enjoy.
This is Jay Martin.
All right, welcome back to the Jay Martin Show. I'm joined once again by Mark Brennan, the CEO of Ascendant Resources. And Mark, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back, Jay.
Well, you've got big news. So today we're recording this on November 28th. The press release just came out. Now, I had you on the show a few months ago, so my audience is familiar with the story. But this morning's news changes the game for Ascendant Resources. So why don't we start with what you guys announced this morning, and then I actually want to backtrack a little bit and catch my audience up on the big picture story behind Ascendant. But what did you guys release this morning?
Yeah, it was sure. We announced this morning that we received $15 million US in exchange for a 1.75% stream with Sprott Stream and Royalty, who are one of the top players in this side of the market. And what was very intriguing about this is, one, is we get a substantial amount of cash to move forward. So any of our cash issues with respect to liquidity, et cetera, moving forward, I hope are now put aside. And then what will happen is this cash will take us to the production decision where we expect to get project funding. The second thing it does, it gives us really good validation from a top tier player in the market. They did extensive due diligence, third-party due diligence with the engineering firms through all aspects of our project. And I think they came to the same conclusion that we have, that this is going to be a mine. So that's the most significant component that I see here.
So you got the cash from Sprott Streaming, and yeah, Sprott is obviously a household name in the resource business. So what kind of conditions come with the $15 million?
Well, the $15 million, what we have to do is we have to give them basically 1.75% of our metal product in exchange for 15% of the metal price until we reach the equivalent of 45,000 ounces of gold. And then what happens is we'll receive 75%. But what's very intriguing about this stream as well is that we will have the ability to buy back 50% of the stream in advance of, in two years after commercial production begins. So in reality, what will more than likely happen is that we will end up with a stream here less than 1% at a time when it really helps us to get this project across the path.
Now, from your perspective, Mark, first of all, congratulations. It's awesome having a CEO on the show and then bringing them back a few months later, having them done exactly what they said they were going to do, move their project forward, on time. So what did Sprott see from your perspective? What raised the eyebrows? What got that conversation in the door? What got Sprott's interest?
Well, I think what we've been able to do as we've been developing the feasibility study that we're embarking upon, which will be completed by the first quarter, is that we've been doing a lot of scientific and technical work, confirming the ore body, confirming the metallurgy, confirming the mining plan, and what the conclusion is very simply is that it looks like we're going to have a very robust mine here, and so I think that's what Sprott were able to see, and I think they wanted to be part of it. Also what they also want to be part of is this tremendous growth story behind it. There really is a big growth story behind this. We expect that with the 28 million tons we have today, will be a fraction of what we can show in a year and a half's time.
Now, the second bullet point you mentioned that this does for you from Sprott is obviously put you, on the path towards a production decision and then in line and in position to receive project financing. So what does that timeline look like, Mark?
We will complete a feasibility study by the end of the first quarter, and then we'll file our environmental impact assessment on the 15th of April, a couple of weeks later. And so what we're already doing right now is we're talking to groups about our capital stack in terms of our production project requirements, construction requirements and such. So I would hope that what we'll have in hand before we actually get to the completion of the feasibility study is that we'll have two partners on the capital stack that will be there subject to good numbers. And frankly, the PEA that we published a year ago, excuse me, were very good numbers. And our expectation for the feasibility as it looks today is that we will actually probably surpass those numbers. So we're very confident that we've got groups that I've worked with very closely for the last number of years who'll be there to fund us into the production scenario. So what we're looking at is we would be feasibility study completed by the end of the first quarter, construction by first quarter 24, and production in mid 25.
Okay, production in mid 25. And where the story side of the asset is developing, in that sense, you're still an exploration story, right? The asset's still growing as you continue to work on it. At this point, can you speak to the forecasted production numbers at all for 2025?
Sure. I mean, if you look at the PEA, I mean, we were targeting 2 million tons per annum, or about 5,500 tons per day. It's a good size operation, producing about 130 million pounds equivalent of zinc equivalent pounds, and basically we're looking at a margin of north of 50%. So it's a very, very robust project, as you saw in the PEA, based on a capex of 130 million. We were looking at an NPV of 247 million US after tax, and an IRR of 55% after tax. Again, I think we'll beat those numbers in our feasibility, and that's an extremely robust project.
Okay. And so in terms of near-term news flow, then, what should investors be looking forward to now?
It'll be the completion of the feasibility, as well as so we'll put out a resource before the end of the year, most likely. We'll report metallurgy before the end of the year, and then we'll announce the feasibility in the first quarter. We'll also start drilling on our satellite deposits, which have had no drilling whatsoever. That's right. And these satellite deposits look very, very similar to the areas where we have our foundation production scenario. So we believe that there's a very high probability, or we're hopeful there's a high probability of success here.
When do you begin that program?
That program will begin within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, very soon.
So very imminently, and I expect we'll be putting out news on that very shortly. But we're very excited by this. It'll be the first time that we've ever gone outside of the core areas, the north and south zones, to focus on expanding the resource.
Okay, now backing up for anybody who's not familiar with what it's like to operate in Portugal, right, where Lagoa Salgada is, the project we've been talking about. Talk to me about the climate in Portugal, access to infrastructure, your location, all of these things.
Sure. I mean, the infrastructure is amazing, right? We're 45 minutes southwest of Lisbon. The reality is that we're a project of national interest. So the fact is that it's in the interest of the local community and the federal government to get our project moving, which has been a tremendous accreditation. But basically, what we're looking at is that we're 45 minutes away from Neves Corvo, one of the biggest mines in Europe, which is owned by Lundin. We're 45 minutes away from Elmina, which produces 220 million pounds of zinc equivalent. And what's very interesting is that if you go to those two communities, you'll see that they're quite prosperous. When you come to our community, it's actually quite dilapidated. And so what they see is the ability for them to prosper with our mine. So it's going to be, again, the infrastructure is phenomenal. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and the reality is that the local community of 7,000 at the town of Grandola, they won't even know there's some mine there. The only reason they'll know there's a mine there is because we'll have a sign outside the door, and they'll see a bunch of trucks going to the highway, bypassing the town, and that'll be the only indication that they will have of a mine.
Yeah, you've talked about that a lot in your promotional material, right? And the way you're building this mine. So expand on that and why that is the case. Why the neighbors? Because it's great that they've got that association. They can look at neighboring communities and see that mining has added affluence to the community. So there's great incentive to push a project like this forward. I'm really curious what a project of national interest means, but also, can you talk about your sustainability initiatives and how you're building this project?
Yeah, I mean, our expectation is, we want to be a leading edge zero footprint company, and the reality is we're looking at every step of the way, electronic machinery and all that kind of stuff, solar power. So from that perspective, we expect to be, very, very high up in terms of the rankings on an ESG perspective. And the ESG is not only the environmental side, but it's also the social element of it as well.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, we will be a hidden kind of project while at the same time really benefiting the local community and regenerating the local community. There was a recent session in the Portuguese Parliament talking about Neves Corvo and Almina in the town of Aljustrel, which are basically the two most prosperous cities or regions in southern Portugal. And they're very vociferously pushing our project because they want to have the same thing in the town of Grandola. So really important. Whenever we've developed mines, we have a team who have developed mines on many occasions, and all facets, all elements of the local community and the environment are always extremely well respected. But we expect to be a market leader. We've engaged already a couple of environmental groups to really put us at the forefront of that.
Thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for elaborating on that. I think you're very smart to approach that way because ESG pressure is not going to go anywhere, right? And setting yourself up to navigate that. Can you expand a little bit on what it means to be a project of national interest in Portugal?
The project of national interest status is basically we're the first mine to actually be granted this status. But basically, it's essentially given to projects that have a certain element of local community support, a number of jobs that it's going to bring in, quantum of investment, and benefits to the community at large. And so what happens is that it's overseen by a group called ASEP, which is the agency that what it'll do is when we submit our studies and reports, they won't sit at the bottom of the line. If there's intercommunication between different governmental departments, what will happen is that this agency will prioritize ours and make sure that we're continually being fed to the top of the list. And so what this will do is it doesn't assure us that this project's going to be built, but I'd have to assume that they've already seen they know that they have the local support of the communities we're around. They know that our environmental plans and they know our footprint. And so from that perspective, they've already given us subject to it looks good, but we still have to fulfill all the obligations as one would expect. But we will reduce our licensing process probably by a good 6 months on an 18-month process.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that's significant.
Yeah.
Mark, what else do you want to leave the audience with today? I mean, why I wanted to get you back on the show is obviously seeing Sprott streaming, right? A big check should turn anybody's head. It's smart money. They're moving into an industry when everybody is running away from it. That's exactly what we as retail investors need to be looking for right now. I wanted to touch on the jurisdiction and the project of national interest because every investor, and rightly so, is more critical, right, of jurisdictional and geopolitical risk right now. And if you don't have that support, it doesn't mean it's a no-fly zone, but right, having that feather in your cap is very, very important. So getting the vote of confidence from Sprott with current asset, but you're expanding on that, and there's news flow coming soon with the satellite project drilling program. We're going to see news relatively soon. Anything else you want to leave my audience with today, Mark?
No, I think we have, I think one thing to note is, we have a core group of guys who are builders. We like to build mines. We like to build things, and this is going to get built. And that's a critical element to know. Because the fact is that the value proposition here with a company with a market cap of 15 million today, it's not sustainable. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity here as long as our story is intact, which I fully believe it will be, as Sprott do. I think it just represents a great, investment opportunity.
I love it. And okay, Mark, look, thank you so much for coming back on the show, getting this refresher back in front of my audience with this new news. The ticker is ASND on the Toronto Exchange, so check them out. And Mark, I'd love to have you back on the show maybe in a quarter and get an update on how things are progressing.
Wonderful, Jay. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now, if you want to take the next step, I publish a weekly newsletter and it's free. There's a link to subscribe right beneath this video, and you can join me and 50,000 other investors weekly for this exclusive content where I share my key action items and takeaways from conversations just like this and plenty others. Thanks for stopping by.